A Towering Task, the story of the Peace Corps, is about the Peace Corps. It's an institutional history about a unique little agency that, as Americans, we are forgetting still exists, and that might well be more important now than it's ever been in its history. The Peace Corps is Peace Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C., and the politics that are going on around this government agency. And Peace Corps is the volunteers on the ground that are in their village, and they make their friends and connections and colleagues and have their projects. And then Peace Corps is this growing body of returned Peace Corps volunteers that are back here in the United States, that are starting nonprofit organizations or that are in our government or in the Foreign Service, bringing many voices together, from volunteers all the way from the beginnings in the early 60s to volunteers that are out in the field right now, was really inspiring, because while there were very different experiences, that glimmer in the eye of, oh my gosh, I'm being transformed here through this experience, was the same whether I talked to somebody who was in Colombia in 1961 or somebody who was in Ukraine 2018. This story hasn't been told until now because it's not an easy story to tell. I think it was very hard to put together some of the difficult pieces of the story where Peace Corps struggled. So there was this prominent murder of a Peace Corps volunteer. And we were so aware that this was such a tricky story to tell. And putting that together sensitively and accurately with journalistic integrity without offending this grieving family was pretty tricky, but unbelievably rewarding, because when we had our premiere in Washington, D.C., the mother of the volunteer who was killed came up to me and said, "Thank you for including my daughter's story. It was so good." And she was really appreciative that we kept her memory alive, that we used they sent us some video clips of her, and we used these perfect video clips, and it was an important part of the story to tell, and it was rewarding to tell it well. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and before I was in the Peace Corps, I worked in film production on the talent side. After I came back from Peace Corps, I decided I wanted to have more control. I wanted to make the films. So I worked my way up through the production department. I worked as a grip, I worked as a teleprompter operator, I worked on audio and video and every single role you could imagine. And found myself in Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta, working as the second assistant to the B camera on a made-for-TV Warner Brothers movie, questioning my life. And I had the incredible fortune of meeting this woman called Brie Murphy. She was a camera woman early on in Hollywood, working on B-horror movies. There weren't a lot of women at all in the field at the time, and so she was this pioneer. And she had retired to Puerto Vallarta, and I was having breakfast with her. And she said, "You know, girl, you need to just stop this camera department hierarchy stuff. You clearly want to tell your own stories, so pick up a camera and make documentaries." And that's how I ended up in documentaries. One of the things I noticed when I worked in the studio on studio productions at public television was that the young men would come in, learn all the technology, and then leave. And the women would always come in really humbly and really careful, and I'm not sure I know that. And so I think it would do us well, and it's not just young women, it's women in the field, to state with confidence what we do know and not be shy. I think that gets you much further. You know, I much prefer working with women whenever I can. I've hired as many female camera operators as I can, or I insisted that our narrator had to be a female actress. I just really wanted to support this female team because you work very differently as a female team. It was also important to me that I could tell the story as a documentary, not as a PR piece, not as a recruitment video, but also not as this expose to tear down the Peace Corps and dig up the dirty little secrets, but as an actual history of the agency. And finding that balance was challenging, to not be too celebratory, to not be too salacious, and be educational while entertaining at the same time.